Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication. Hi everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Ideas on Stage podcast. I'm Phil Waknell and I'm here today with Peter Ivanov. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Phil. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's good to see you again. So Peter and I actually came across each other a few years ago at the GSA conference in Germany. GSA is the German Speakers Association. So Peter, unlike me, actually does speak German. So originally you're from Bulgaria, right?
That's right.
But now living in Hamburg in Germany. And so we met at this conference, and we've been a couple of other conferences in the meantime. And that basically introduces Peter as a pretty well-known conference speaker and also a best-selling author on the art of virtual power teams. And so this is his best-selling book, which I thoroughly recommend. And particularly right now, here in the middle of 2020, when a lot of companies have learned that you can work virtually as long as you do it right. And virtual teams are getting to be pretty much everywhere in almost every company. So, Peter, if I can ask you a first question here. We all know about virtual teams, but what makes a virtual power team?
It's a good question, Phil. We've been working virtually, and Corona forced us, as you said, to work even more virtual, lockdown at home. So from the global multinationals, they have distributed teams with several offices where you have multiple team members. But now Corona scenario is fully remote, everyone in a different location. So virtual teams have been around. People underestimate a little bit their growth. What would be your guess? How many in percentage are the virtual teams globally, including distributed, remote, all teams that are in more than one location? What would be your guess?
Oh gosh, I'm not even sure I want to guess about that, because I guess it depends so much on the company, but I'm going to put a figure out there. How about 30%?
30%, yes. Forrester says differently. Forrester Research, 40-year-old study, they say 81%, and
Wow.
60% of them in different time zones. So now with Corona, probably a bit more. How many or what makes the distinction between the regular virtual teams, which are already quite widespread, and a virtual power team? I think the power comes from alignment. I compare a virtual team with the atom, where you have a nucleus and then various particles flying around. An atom has a lot of power, as we know. Now, the virtual power teams have a strong gravity to the nucleus. The point is making virtual power team is to make sure that all the team members are attracted and strongly hold to the nucleus. But the nucleus, here is the point, maybe disappointing for some managers, is not the manager, it's not the project manager. This is the purpose and the goal of the team. So to establish a virtual power team, you have to work as a team on the goal, on the big why, on the big what. I can go in more details. And then power comes from this gravity. In the poorly led teams, the team members get lost in space, just like particles, So if you have a strong purpose and goal, then comes the communication, which is key. Not the boss to dominate the discussion and to speak most of the time or finger pointing. Here comes many different ways to set up the communication in a positive way. So you retain the gravity and even over time improve it and improve with it the performance, sometimes exponentially. There is a tick after some point in time, the proper goal setting, the proper momentum of communication. There are a lot of things about culture. My virtual power teams, by the way, as a concept described in the book and all my speeches and seminars, comprises the 10 big rocks. These are the 10 success factors to retain the gravity and unleash the power. And they are broken down in 3 groups, like if you imagine your team as a human being, head, body, and heart. And head is about goal setting. Who is a member of the team? Some people, managers sometimes underestimate, say, I don't see the people, why should I bother? What are they as individuals? From my perspective, big mistake. So we have a very concise format where they go deep, present themselves, and connect on a human level. Then we discover the strengths. In a poorly led teams, they feel anonymous, just as a resource, disconnected. We discover the natural strengths and talents. That's the second big rock. And then we set interdependent goals. We set the goal bottom up with a streamlined process, and people choose. There is no delegation. They choose their sub-goal and milestone that they take ownership based on their strengths. And then they have a full decision-making freedom, not that the boss is, in terms of how. They have some budgetary and time constraints, but then they know how. And that was the body. I will be probably very long answer. That was the head, who is a member of the team and what is the goal of the team. Then the body is structured communication. Here we have forms and agenda, knowledge management, we link to the strength, and regular feedback. Sometimes scarce, we institutionalize feedback. So here we establish a structured communication, not manager-centric or problem-centric, but structured in a way that everyone can contribute and shine. It's to some extent pre-designed. And the third part, my favorite, the heart, is the culture of the team. So recognition. You probably know people leave companies because of lack of recognition. They leave their bosses, not the companies. So in a virtual environment, you have to be even more creative to come up with the ways. Here, over my 6 years of developing virtual power teams, I have a huge portfolio of ways to recognize despite the distance. Then diversity, it's about building the optimum team culture. On the free scales, the team chooses. It's important to empower the team, not the boss being the smarter. And then winning spirit is the number 9. And then the 10th, which I usually keep as a surprise for them, is next generation leaders. How to involve the new, millennials, digital natives, how to make sure you take their momentum and commitment and have even stronger team. So long answer, but power teams come from the gravity. That's the key word to the nucleus, which is not the manager, but the team purpose and goal, and then sustaining the momentum of communication.
Now, I think one of the things that a lot of people might have imagined when they heard the beginning of that answer there as to what makes a virtual power team, when you talked about the nucleus, I think a lot of people by default would have imagined, that's the manager. Mm-hmm. And it's not. And it's really important to understand that you've got to be gravitating around this purpose and that the manager is not the center of the team. Do you see, you've worked with a lot of different companies over the years here. What are the main mistakes that you see managers make when they try to implement a virtual team?
Absolutely. So I would highlight 3 mistakes and maybe even put a formula in the end where manager is a part of it. And I'm a mathematician, by the way. I graduated, I'm a master of mathematics. So 5 years, my first love. So I like to put formulas for anything, including leadership, storytelling, and so on.
Fantastic.
But 3 main mistakes, I think they are different aspects, but the 3 main ones are they underestimate the personality. They say, and with virtual teams, you can get the best experts. You have the ability to search and recruit them. But you need to look at them as holistic human beings. And if they say, I don't care what they do in their private times, what makes their heart sing, big mistake. And therefore, they're very effective ways. And I'm very happy to share. That's why I'm doing my seminars where you could, in 5 to 10 minutes, let people open up. I do it with a live journey, and particular people share their highlights, moments of excellence they're most proud of, but also the moments where it's most difficult. And with 3-4 extra moderation questions, it becomes, very powerful. And not as a smart manager, even you say, okay, I'll take care, I'll deep dive in my people. If you just do it one by one during recruitment, not the same as you do it in a group format. So you build a lot of gravity by that time. And then we use avatars, we discover the strengths. So there are many ways to deep dive and let people share. And instead of feeling anonymous, if you don't do it in a poor way, they start feeling like heroes because their talents are recognized and familiar to everyone. And then knowing the other talents, a new feeling emerges. With this bouquet of skills, we could achieve anything. So it's really within like 2-3 hours, that's what people share also in the testimonials, all of a sudden a new team feeling emerges. And it's transferable skill. It's not rocket science or any black magic. It's simply do it consistently with care. So the first mistake is ignoring or neglecting the importance of personality and focusing maybe more on the professional side and the expertise. Second is managers sometimes tend to play it, they speak most of the time in the meetings, particularly online meetings, because they did the preparation, they care for the company, they have the best arguments. This is not empowering behavior. Google did a research, not sure if the audience, it's called Project Aristotle. Have you come across? Yeah, Project Aristotle.
I heard of that, yeah.
Yeah. So there are 2 main discoveries. Maybe I'll share briefly. They wanted to research what their highest performing teams have in common. what is the characteristic that all their top performing teams have in common. And they researched, and they saw that like 90%, almost all teams, they have an equal share of speaking. When they have a conference, introverts manage to kind of speak up, extroverts manage to shut up. So you have people contributing equally, which is a great characteristic, and that's related to the mistake that I shared and I will highlight. But that was not all. They continued to research, and then at one point I discovered that all teams have one characteristic in common. And I would ask you if you have any guess or the audience before I announce it.
I don't know. I mean, I could think of a number of possibilities.
Yes.
I mean, one thing is that they have met each other in real life at least once, because I've always found in my experience, I've been managing virtual teams for like 20 years. I've always found that it works much better when you actually do know each other. And that's maybe a topic we come back to. I don't know whether that's the right answer, but it's something I would certainly care about.
Yes.
Was that the right answer?
Not particularly this one, although this is right, as in essence is right, but they make it more, they introduce a term for it, psychological safety, which means people feel safe enough to take risks, not being afraid that they will be laughed at if they do a mistake or it will have a negative impact on their career. They feel safe enough to take risks. They feel safe enough to ask for help and to offer help. And also they feel safe enough to show their vulnerability, not just their perfect side that sometimes we show on social media, but also their weaknesses and ask for help. So all the teams manage to crack this, and the more safe they feel, the more they behave in a vulnerable way, and the more performance goes through the roof. And hence, second mistake in virtual teams, managers sometimes tend to speak most of the time. And the trick is to empower people to have an equal share of contribution. That's when the team spirit throws, done when you build on the ideas of each other, done when you make commitment, you ask for help, and so on. So to some extent, initially I institutionalize it. I make the meetings in such a way that everyone is having an equal slot, but then it's become a natural, even if it's a decision-making meeting or a product design meeting, which require a lot of collaboration. People get used to, after a couple of iterations, to speak up for the more introverted ones and shut up for the more extroverted, and really build on the position of others. So that was the second mistake. First, neglect or personality factors. Second is speaking too much and dominating the discussion. And third one is, I think, people, it has to do with recognition. I would go to an extreme and say, some managers expect extraordinary performance. They want to get the best bonus and the best performance, but they are not willing to give extraordinary rewards. They expect that with a kind of very average reward, they will get extraordinary performance. And I have a many case studies when we set audacious prize for outstanding performance. For example, but that's a long story. It was establishing global shared services, 2 years project. We said if we finish 3 months earlier, we'll go all 30 people involved in the project for 2 days to Tenerife. That would have been our celebration. And the board agreed, because if we finish 3 months earlier, we release 250,000 euro. And with 50 of them, we go to Tenerife. So in the end, we finish earlier, we save 200,000. So the point is, you can let the team decide, and it is key the team to decide. Work also with NGOs, we have zero budget, but they come up with a cool thing, sometimes with their sponsors. There is no money transaction, but Youth Against AIDS, they get tickets for Bayern Munich games in the loge because they had a powerful sponsor. So if the team decides, you have a cool reward, people go extra mile. And in the corporate world, usually we are talking about massive productivity gains who can fund great award and then and a reward and still save a lot of money. So I think this makes it a bit, this is the extra tick after some point in time. And with creative reporting, it's very important. This is just an aspect, small aspect, to have a visual where people can see where we are, who needs help, who can help. Like in this case with Tenerife, we had an island, instead of typical traffic light for project management, island, and 20 parachuters for each of the countries, which milestone after milestone they were approaching the island. So you really can see how far are we from the goal, who needs more help, who has landed and can offer help. So if you have a cool reward and this reporting, and then you establish the communication right, that's where the performance curve starts to go exponential. So that would be the third mistake, neglecting the importance of reward and expecting outstanding results with just average rewards.
Well, those sound like three very clear mistakes which people would make probably quite a lot, I guess. And in some cases, managers' hands are a little bit tied in terms of what they can do. I remember that was often my case when I was managing virtual teams at HP. It was very limited what we were actually able to do in terms of rewarding people, particularly. But I guess if you don't ask, you don't get. And as long as you can point out that the return on investment is greater than the investment, then maybe it's worth doing. I'd like to come back to the second piece here. So your second mistake is managers talking too much in the meetings and dominating the communication. I've seen a lot of this recently, where we've been helping a lot of clients to learn how to manage virtual meetings, which they've in many cases never had to do before. And we've come up with the distinction between the role of like the manager or the team leader and an animator. And we've
Yes,
really tried to say in an online meeting, it's great to have an animator who is not the team leader, but
yes,
who is the one who is responsible for managing the flow of the meeting,
yes,
setting up the meeting, explaining the agenda, explaining the objectives, keeping people on target with the objectives. But during the meeting, one of the key roles of that animator is making sure everybody gets a chance to speak,
yes,
and making sure particularly that the quieter people, the people who will not interrupt, who will not try to impose their ideas and
yes,
put themselves forward, but to make sure those people actually do have a chance to speak and are not just drowned out by the noise of all of the extrovert, typical,
absolutely.
usual suspects who dominate everything. Um, and it's a really important role, I find.
Yes.
Do you find that it's many of these, we call them like the introverted type people, do you find that they often are the ones who have the best ideas?
Oh, yes, yes, because they observe, they reflect, they sometimes can discover risks that other more kind of extroverted and more emotional people would not see. So they certainly have great ideas, and it's a matter of unlocking and also rewarding their contribution, praising their contribution. That's one of the big rocks as well. It's, by the way, I'm a father of 5 girls and a wife, so I have 6 women at home. If there is one thing that work, if I say to lead would be a lie, they probably lead me, but that we still have some good time together is praise, praise, praise. Praise the result if it's a result. Praise the behavior if there is no result yet, but people help each other, support each other, demonstrating praise the behavior. If there is no result, no behavior, look harder. There is always something to praise from the heart. And I think the introverted would require some encouragement and some recognition of their contribution, because usually these are pearls. Sometimes, you get things that would have overseen otherwise. Um, and also on your point, the manager is a key. He's not the nucleus, but he has some key roles to play. He's not the center of the universe, but he needs to, as you said, the animator. I used to call it service coordinator. Probably your word is better. But it has to be somebody with a strength to animate, to moderate, with a good time management skill that could run the meeting. And then there are many things. We go into different area, but many things you could do virtually. People skip. There are many great icebreaker exercises which could make it like a physical meeting. And also, you mentioned in terms of kind of political support on the reward, manager has a key role to communicate and explore the communication talents and the skills to communicate the vision of the team, the successes, the roadmap externally. And this is the way how we can get traction. In order to ask for a reward, you need to have a good stakeholder analysis and map and make sure you communicate. And this is something that the manager has to ensure. Either do it himself, he has to do some networking because he has access to these peers and more senior, but also have other forums. So there are many roles that the manager has to do in order making the talents in the team visible and flourish, like the one that moderates, the one that probably orchestrates the external communication. So whenever you ask for the word, you get. Make sure people know their talents, and some of the key components are covered and addressed by the best people in the team.
So, Peter, a lot of what you've told us about these 10 key success factors, and
Yes.
about, for example, we just talked about the idea of making a proactive efforts to listen to the thoughts of the quieter people, to get their thoughts, to get their ideas. um, all of these things which we've heard so far, surely we can apply them just as much to physical teams as to dispersed virtual teams. So do you find that a lot of what you teach people, a lot of the work you do with companies, that they actually find they can apply most of it to their physical teams as well?
Yes, absolutely. The all 10 big rocks, the 10 success factor, are applicable also for local teams. But the point here, each one of them, if you neglect, if you underestimate, each one of them drops your performance in the virtual context more than in local. And you neglect 2 or 3 or more, and then your team members start to get lost in space and performance is significantly lower. But there is one thing, so all of them are applicable to local as well, and you wouldn't waste time, but for virtual, they're crucial. That's my first point. Second point is, in a virtual environment, you need to put an extra effort in the meetings in order to make them productive. An extra effort, I mean, in terms of preparation. And I distinguish between four level of online collaboration. The first one is update meeting. And now with Corona, many people complain that they have too many update meetings and they don't have time, to do creative work themselves. And I think one of the antidotes to that is manage the pre-read. So the basic level of collaboration, if you have report and so on, set the detail in advance so people can read at their convenience. Don't go into the detail that could be written, and just go into the, what is the problem, who can help me out, flash out the opportunities for collaboration. And also another antidote is single source of truth. If you're still managing attachments in version 1.5, 1.6, the likelihood to get a different view is high. People to get confused is high. So try to have a single source of the truth. One document now with Google Docs and Microsoft SharePoint, you could collaborate on the same version, and for each problem have a single source of the truth. That was the first update. Second level is when you have to make brainstorming. You want from the people, and you clarify the purpose of our meeting is brainstorming. Expectations that everybody will think in advance and will contribute as much ideas as possible on this particular topic. So you clarify the purpose in advance, expectation of contribution. The third level is decision making. So it has to do the brainstorming element, but people have to debate and in the end arrive at the decision. So here in a virtual teams, we could be proactive. We could say, okay, this is the topic we want to make a decision, not the manager say, I'm the smartest, I'll make the call. Sometimes this crisis is needed, but in normal life is absolutely counterproductive and counter-motivating. So this is where we need to make a decision. He could kick off the process with listing some options in a block, and then invite people, give them 24, 48 hours, depending how global is the team, to contribute. Maybe different options, maybe to give pros and cons. So by the time people get to make a decision, a lot of preparation, particularly for global team, happen in asynchronous ways, but you see people can like and so on, the topics, the options with the resonance will emerge naturally. So then you have to encourage a healthy debate, not going into, you may have conflicting options and interests, but you could find the underlying purpose of the team. So in the meeting, you expect a lot of preparation and input before we come. And then in the meeting, I would like everybody to list his option and contribution. So again, this preparation, because of the essence of virtual team, being more global, different time zones, having technology that could be very enabling for them, you could do it smarter. And the fourth level is like product design. You create something new. And there, I, for example, have companies. I was in Bali last year speaking on an event called Running Remote. And there were companies running big operations, sometimes 1,000+ employees without a single office, everybody in a different space. And many things emerged. One of the companies, they asked them, and there was a digital company with very dynamic portfolio. So they were introducing like 3-4 products each year. And they asked them, how do you do product design? How do you develop your product roadmap? They say the founders and the management team, like 9 people, they get together. First of all, they get everyone twice a year at one place, so this 1,000 people. But 6 weeks before, the management team gets together and decide how they will design this 1 or 2 days key interaction of the people in order to arrive at the product roadmap. What are the options, market trends, how they will have individual contribution, how they will have a small breakout discussion, sorting out options, then how they will arrive at decisions. So it requires a lot of preparation. Technology helps a lot, but then you need to have a good process to make sure everybody is heard, everybody contributes, everybody feels recognized. So to some extent, again, another long answer. It's not my style, but today I'm into the long answers. All this is critical for virtual teams. It's applicable for local, but critical for virtual. And for virtual, it could be even more effective if you prepare in the right way, if you set the right expectations, and if you moderate, again, not by chance, but with a well-thought process during the meeting, you could have fantastic results.
Fantastic. Now, that actually aligns really closely with what we've been teaching in our virtual meeting revolution classes recently, where we've identified, as we prepared this course, we identified a number of different types of online meetings. And so one type of online meeting we established was collaboration. So that's where you're actually trying to do something together. So that corresponds to your kind of brainstorming meeting, but also your product design, where you're building something together or coming up with something together. We also came up with the decision meetings.
Yes.
We came up with team meetings. So this is where, for example, you're not actually aiming to necessarily collaborate to build something. You're not aiming to take a decision, but the main objective is actually to build community.
Absolutely.
And to provide that forum to make sure everybody feels connected to the team, connected to their colleagues, connected to the purpose of the team. And that, of course, is a danger if you're not physically in the same place, that people can be disconnected if you don't have a lot of communication and presence.
Absolutely.
And the one that we found that we realized there is no purpose for this is the information meeting, what you call the update meeting.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Sure, you can have maybe a short part in a team meeting or something about that, but generally, if you can do it in a document, do it in a document. It's far more effective because people forget most of what they hear quickly. So if they want information, then give them a document and give them a coffee and give them time to read it. So one of the good practices I found with one of my clients recently is that when they're sending a pre-read document ahead of a decision meeting, for example, they will actually schedule 15 or 30 minutes in everybody's calendar just for quiet reading time. So that they are able to, so that people have that in their agenda. They know that there's a pop-up that's going to come up that says, oh, this is when I need to read the document. Otherwise, their calendar gets filled up with lots of other meetings, and they'll arrive at the meeting not having read the document, but they won't admit they haven't read the document. Therefore, they'll just try and get through it. This is why, I mean, Jeff Bezos at Amazon, he always makes sure that every meeting starts with some silent time where everybody is reading the pre-read. Just to make sure everyone's read it. And it works very well. In online meetings, not quite so straightforward to have a whole lot of silent time, but just scheduling those 15 or 30 minutes in people's calendars in advance can be a really, really big step forward. It's very simple to do. Now, what I hear about everything that you're putting forward in the idea of the virtual power teams, there's actually, I mean, there's nothing revolutionary about it. I mean, you're a mathematician, but I mean, this is not rocket science. It should be common sense, but it's just not nearly common enough. Now, this year, of course, this year, 2020, the year of COVID-19, the year of massive lockdowns, the year that a lot of people realized that actually a lot more people can work from home than we previously thought. This is probably changing a lot in the kind of virtual teams that you're dealing with, because previously, I guess you had a lot of virtual teams where you had people in different countries, in different continents, but they're all working from an office most of the time. So when I was at HP, I had people working in my teams in lots of different places, but generally most of the time they were working from an HP office. And I was working a lot with the HP offices in Boise, Idaho, in Miami, sometimes in Palo Alto, in Singapore, etc. But they were in an office, which means they were connected to the company, etc. Now we're seeing a lot more people working from home, what makes a successful home office, and how do you motivate people who are working from home most, if not all of the time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil, and being asked a lot. And I myself, as a entrepreneur, I've been doing home office 6 years, also in cafes and inspirational places. I would highlight 3 or 4 tips that worked for me and for many people that I know. So one is, and it's very basic, take regular breaks. Sometimes if you're in the office, people come and ask you, let's go for a coffee, and you stand up and you take breaks because external factors make you do a break. Sometimes we tend to not make breaks and stare at the screen and have Zoom after Zoom, and then you check the email. And so take regular breaks. My kind of what works for me, I set an alarm every 25 minutes. For sure, I plan in advance. This is my creative block. This is I tackle. After 25 minutes, I stand up and do an active break. I'm more of a sportsman. I would move up and it gives me energy immediately. But for some, could be a yoga, meditation, put your favorite music, do a little dance. Take 5 to 10 minutes break makes a huge difference in terms of creativity. 3 blocks with a break, I assure you will achieve much more than if you do it without any break. Second, it's applicable also for local office, but for home, because there are many distractors, it is bundle things. We gain productivity by doing similar things and doing momentum. Like I eat the frog early, the most, the task that frightens me more, I do first during planning from the previous day, and 1 or 2 blocks, 25 minutes. Then I have a communication block. Towards lunchtime, around 11, I would check the email channels. I check email only twice a day, by the way. I can afford it, have assistants and so on. Some jobs maybe do more, but try to bundle the emails, not respond immediately, because this context switching is tiring and it kills productivity. So bundle things. I would do creative block, communication block, another creative or more like calls. I would bundle the calls also. I may have scheduled, but if I call clients or other things which are more kind of tactical, I would bundle them in one go. So there is a risk they don't pick up. Anyway, run the risk, but I'm much more productive. I'm in my call mood, if you wish. So bundle is the second tip. And the third one is play around the space in home. So these were more around how do you manage time. Second is related to space. Try to have a space at home, a desk, ideally a room, which is your home office. So you go there, you enter the room, you start working. If you can afford a room, great. Ensure you have a good internet connectivity is crucial. If not, make a corner, which is your working corner, and then having something like a do not disturb table. Because if you dare now with these homeschooling kids, I have a small kids, they would storm, minute after minute, but I have this do not disturb sign and also a table. So now for 1 hour, please don't speak to me unless somebody's life is in danger. So make sure you have a little bit of barriers and protect your space, not all the time, but in critical times. And I know for some ladies works, some put a different dress and makeup if you wish. So you go to work even at home, but you have a ritual to enter. And then even more important is to have a ritual when you finish work, because you can also go into the jeopardy that you are on all this asynchronous channel in a global team in Slack and so on. You receive constantly messages, you check email. It will be good to set, okay, 6 o'clock, whatever it is for me, I finish work. Then it's the next day. Some people then even have a different profile in their mobile device that they don't get notification and they don't get business related stuff. But it is important to set some borders in terms of start, stop, some rituals, and secure, protect the space that you could work there.
That's certainly a lot of very, very helpful tips there, Peter. Thanks very much for those. So, so let me then come back to the idea of like physical fitness, because if we're all
Yes,
sitting down all day and we're stuck indoors and we can't go
yes,
out or whatever, I mean, how do you stay fit when you're stuck at
yes.
home?
In terms of keeping fit, you could do many things indoors and outdoors. Um, For me personally, what works, I usually do the exercise early. I'm a very, by nature, without a clock, alarm clock, I wake up around 5 a.m. So I would usually, but this is my routine, I don't impose it. I would take like half an hour for more creative kind of stuff. Once again, visualize my day, my goals. There is some priming routines that I do from Tony Robbins with some particular breathing pattern. But essentially I would go again, what's the ideal flow of my day, and visualize it and feel it, how it would feel if I achieve all my goals set for the day. And then I would do some exercise, and it varies. Sometimes it's more because I throw discus and javelin, it requires strength. Sometimes it's related to weights. Sometimes it's just aerobic. If I'm traveling, to a conference, I would just go out and run for half an hour. Not much, but and I'm jogging. I'm not forcing myself too much, but I just bring oxygen to my blood. So if you have a morning routine that brings oxygen, is good. If you're locked down, you could also apply different gymnastics which do not require any proficiency level. There are, for example, 5 Tibetans, which are very popular. If you Google, there are 5 exercises you can start your day. 5 times 20 takes 10 minutes, not more, and you get energized. You kind of flood your core muscles and all other muscles with blood, and they are made in a way that you energize your chakras. You help, the energy to flow. So do something in the morning, maybe not immediately after waking up, but before you go to breakfast or so on. That would be my tip if you are more sporty one. And then one of my big sort of secret, because I publicly mentioned, is do some stretching. People underestimate it. I was lucky enough, when you throw javelin, it's all about amplitude. So you need to be flexible to hit it from the most far. So you need to have flexibility in your hips, in your core, in your shoulders, and all this is exercise. So from early age, I was exposed to good stretching exercises, and I kept it over the years. I stopped for like 20 years, I stopped throwing, and then midlife crisis, I started competing again, but I kept on doing stretching. It's unbelievable. You don't sweat. You could do it anytime. You don't need extra room. It helps a lot. Stretching with some breathing patterns, very easy to research, gives you a lot of energy, and then you could still perform. You can still, go for a maximum weight and so on. If you wish, you could still compete if you retain your stretching level. And I think the third one is just enjoy. It's not related to sport, but every now and then I have a break when I would do stretching for 10 minutes, and I have another 5 routines, for the legs and for the lower back and so on. Takes not more than 10 minutes. But then one of my breaks is I just put some of my favorite songs, whatever mood I am, and I just dance. So I like dancing, and the music and the movement creates and puts you in a different state. So when you go back, you are in absolutely different state. It shouldn't be forceful. I'm a world champion in discus throw for men over 40. So it's a significant achievement. I never forced myself. I do things because I like them. And in the morning, probably you need to force to start, but when you finish, you feel so much fresher, and you anchor this state, and it moves you out of. And similar with the stretching. You don't have to force yourself. You just need to try it, and you'll see the positive benefits.
Now, a lot of our listeners might be thinking that it's a little strange for us to be talking about a leadership communication topic. That's the whole topic of this podcast. But we're hearing tips about stretching and things. I would say actually it shouldn't be that strange, because we're talking about productivity in virtual teams and having people working productively from their home environment. And in order to be productive, well, we're not going to be productive just sitting on our bottoms all day. I remember reading a really good book. I don't know if you know this one, Peter. It was called The Corporate Athlete.
Okay, no.
I forget the name of the author, but I'll try and find it, and we'll put it on the screen for those of you watching on YouTube right at the bottom here. But it was a really fantastic book, which explained that human beings are not designed to be sitting around all day and having telephone meetings or sitting in front of a computer. We actually do need to condition our bodies, to prepare our bodies for this kind of activity. That's one of the reasons I have a standing desk, is because we're not designed to be sitting around all day. and it gives me a lot more energy for me to be standing up. So that would be my little tip here, which I got from my
Mhm.
colleague Pierre, is a standing desk will give you a lot more energy throughout the day. Um, but it actually it is really important, and I find that as a virtual team leader myself, I always do try to encourage my colleagues to do some kind of physical activities and break up their day in order to be productive at the times when they are actually doing creative or productive work. So it is important, and those are, I think, really, really useful tips, Peter. So thanks for those. Now, I
Yeah.
have you talked about when you're speaking at conferences. Now, you speak or you spoke a lot at conferences. I use the past tense because this year, I guess there haven't been very many conferences to be speaking at. Um, what are you expecting the future is going to be in terms of the physical conferences that you would tend to speak at, but also in terms of online conferences?
Mhm.
What trends are you seeing, and what is your prediction for the future?
Yeah. I think many things will be, the new normal will be different. You know, more people will work from home. Uh, Corporate will probably have less office space to accommodate some of the people, but then rotate. In a conference space, luckily, because my topic is virtual, I had my last two keynotes in January, February, but then I had more online. And sometimes we had 100 plus people, global audience, sometimes twice a day for like Asia and then Europe, Americas. What I think will be the trend is there will be less physical events, but there will be still significant amount of physical events, because still one of the major benefits of events, apart from hearing some great ideas and some panels, is networking. So people would like to network with like-minded people and find partners, find clients and develop. So to some extent, the virtual events, which now also become different. So I've been speaking on some virtual events. Some of them I was invited by a corporate, you know, to speak to their global leaders. For some of them, it was an event with many other speakers, but depends the level of interaction. And now there are many platforms, like for example, rem.co is like remote conference. They provide a lot of opportunities to network in a similar fashion that you do in a physical event. Like usually Zoom is very advanced in the breakout groups, and therefore I've done workshops like 6 hours a day, but it wasn't boring because you always change the dynamic. You know, you go breakout rooms, you come back, you present. There, by the way, I could list 3 roles which are essential if you go to leverage of these breakout sessions. But I think to some extent, we will see a new kind of different virtual events. And REMCO is different in this way that you could have a topical sessions and people can just jump on and off. They decide where they go. So they have a lot more flexibility. Like in the usual networking, you could speak to someone uh, in Zoom, which is by far more advanced than MS Teams and WebEx. You set the people in advance and they can go back to plenum and back to, but they are assigned to a certain room. Here you have full flexibility. So I think in the virtual events, there will be a lot more opportunity and more freedom for the people to join and network with others. Again, in a good virtual fashion, you could plan it. One of the events I was, you know, people were very properly listed with their formats. You could schedule a lot of meetings without leaving the platform. So you could do a lot of planned networking in advance, and also opportunities for unplanned networking. I think technology develops very quickly. It becomes more and more scalable. It becomes more and more open to design it in the best way you wish. And you save a lot of travel budget, you save a lot of time, private time. So as with the home office, there will be more virtual events. They will not be the same, like upload, download, one speaks, the other listens. That's boring, wouldn't fly. But people will have the opportunity to take advantage, to network, to debate, to brainstorm with all other people. And then again, like with the virtual leadership, it's a matter of design. How can you, for this particular topic and for this particular audience, how can you create the best format? And it requires preparation, it requires to give them some guidance, but then it will be also very valuable. People will still, people like to travel, they like to meet people face to face, to hug people. You cannot still, you know, hug people virtually, feel the energy, feel the size, all these things that you cannot do virtually. but it will be a reasonable balance. I'm sure as technology develops, uh, there will be great meetings, physical one as we know, but they will have some probably follow-ups in a virtual space where could, based on the network, we could leverage and develop further.
Still a place for some human to human contact in the idea of doing physical conferences, but probably fewer than we had before. Well, it'll be interesting to see whether your crystal ball turns out right on that one. But another thing that's then coming up in the future and in the near future for you is you have a new book coming out. And whereas your first one was Virtual Power Teams, the second one is called Power Teams Beyond Borders. So tell me a little bit about what's new, what's different in this new book, and when's it coming out?
What is new? I think the first book was focused entirely on corporate audience. Second one as well, but it was an entrepreneur who is mobilizing a global team for a very good reason. He sees an earthquake in the Himalayas. So there was a story. Both books have a story. Half of it is a story which unfolds and is very emotional. And then based on a story, we articulate the method and demonstrate how it made work. So the first was around, corporate vision from startup to success. Second one looks beyond. It looks at the sustainable world. So virtual teams, not just to resolve business challenges, but to tackle the toughest problems of humanity. So the story is slightly different. And beyond borders is not just international and global, which is the key challenge of the current multinationals and the growing scale-ups, but also beyond your organizational borders. At some point in time, they're in the energy and he moves. He's a senior manager in the energy company. For some reasons, they restructure. He has to make a choice, move to Kuala Lumpur or stay and start something new. He decides, also influenced by his family. His family is very more involved in the second book. And his daughter, he decides to do something in the renewable sector. And then it is not an expertise book about energy and renewable energy at all, but it shows how we don't have just a business challenge and a profit and a growth challenge, but also we are responsible citizens, and how you could grow a company, cooperate. That's where I started. They would cooperate. The R&D department of many companies, they will have a power community. Well, they come up with a breakthrough innovation, which is happening right now. Even one of my companies who is developing Corona in a biotech vaccines, they having a similar R&D partnership, and I was helping them, although they are competitors, how they could. So beyond the borders is not just global, it is beyond your organizational border, beyond the profit and individual corporate targets towards a more sustainable world. So it looks, and also the effect of family, because this home office involves the family is exposed to your career, and the other way around. We are much more interlinked. And here it gives a lot of emotional stories for the book, but also a lot of lessons. How can you marry family and career and be a sustainable and responsible citizen as well?
That sounds like it's the kind of thing that we all need to learn about and we all need to read. So, well, when it comes out, I'll be getting a copy for every member of Ideas on Stage. When's it due out?
I think it's published by Wiley. I was very honored that they approached me and they wanted to publish book with me. And it's a 200 years old publishing house. I think latest by October, could be even September. Not sure what was the latest. I'm just now working very hard on the manuscript towards mid-July, and they have their production process, but they promise to fast track it as soon as possible because it's very topical. So if you say October, I think it's a safe bet.
Okay, so it sounds like a fantastic 2020 Christmas present for all of your employees, for all of your team members, because I think this is the kind of thing we all need to hear about. Well, listen, I hope all of our listeners have heard a lot of useful, interesting tips about working remotely, about leading virtual teams, and about being productive remotely. I've certainly learned a lot. I've really enjoyed the chat, Peter. Any last words before we finish?
I'm grateful for this opportunity. When you spoke, it's not like conclusion, but when you said the personal meeting, I wanted to comment, I work a lot with NGOs and same principles apply. You don't have salary, you don't have a formal boss, same 10 big rocks we customize. One of their discovery, I work with Teach for All, I work with Youth Against AIDS and many others. They sometimes lack structure because these are young people and they are very passionate. And one of their key discoveries, and it's related to your comment, usually you have like a functional team. These are like the management board, and they have a lot of regional coordinators. They operate within particular geography and they do not, in many cases, it's illogical. They don't get together on a regular basis. And that's what we discovered. The regional coordinator has so much to share. And we introduce a 2 minutes personal update. We do it for business as well. When you deep dive in the personality through the life journey, picture, I have a flash intro question, strength discovery, and so on. But then you have to keep the momentum on a regular basis. Just take 2 minutes time. They get together, mention what was their highlight for each and everyone individually since they last met. It puts you on a positive spiral, and they discuss and see how they can collaborate. It is very simple tip. It works miracles, particularly if you have a bigger audiences which can cooperate, but they were, if they get together for an update meeting, it's boring. They don't want to get together. If they have a personal meeting, and this is the opportunity to get help and to ask for help, it becomes completely different perspective. So if you look at the holistic people, and the more we become responsible citizens, the more we have to look at each and every one like a star, bringing particular talents, but make these talents visible for the rest of the team and let them, work in their strengths here in the talent area, and let them share what is really dear to their hearts. So I think I will conclude with one sentence which has guided me through the years, and it has to do with this virtual reality, and it goes like this. If you dream alone, this is just a dream. If we people dream together, this is the beginning of a new reality. Thank you once again.
And that seems like a very, very good sentence to finish on. Peter, thank you so much for your time. I hope our listeners have really enjoyed this, and I hope that they'll be able to come across you soon, either in one of your books, or potentially they'll see you in a keynote online or in person, talking about virtual power teams beyond borders, and how we can all be more productive and happier contributors. So thanks a lot. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Take care. If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like. So please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com, or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.